Hi, everyone. My name is Aaris Sherin, and I'm here with faculty from the graphic design program at St. John's University. And we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to be a graphic design student and study graphic design at St. John's and sort of be a designer working in New York more broadly. So I'm going to begin with asking our faculty here to introduce themselves and tell us what they teach. And I'm going to go a little bit in order of who you as an incoming student might meet first. So Annette, can you tell us just a little bit about what you teach?
Sure, yes. So my name is Annette Cords, and I teach a lot of the beginning and foundation classes. I teach graphic design 1, foundation design. I have taught color theory and also graphic design 2. And I am an artist and I work on the intersection of art and design.
Great, thanks, Annette. Liz, I know you don't always teach graphic design 1, but you often do, so you want to go next?
Yep. My name is Liz DeLuna, and I am a professor of graphic design. So quite often I do teach the intro graphic design classes, graphic design 1, graphic design 2. I also teach advanced typography classes and motion graphics, and I am a motion graphics designer.
Great, thanks. Brian?
Yeah, I'm Brian James, and I teach a little bit of a variety here, but mostly the interaction design courses. We've got 2 of those. So web projects, making apps, even some little animation stuff here and there. I've also taught some special electives on game design and information design. So again, kind of in that digital realm. And I occasionally teach the Intro to Graphic Design 2 class.
Great. And so just to catch everybody up, in our program, you do take graphic design 1 and 2 your freshman year. That is a little bit different than in other programs. So Annette, can you tell us a little bit about what it might be like for someone to be a freshman at St. John's that first year?
Sure, I'd love to. So one of the things, especially because I teach graphic design 1 and foundation design, which happens in the first semester. And both of those classes, I think it's really important to get to know your peers, and it's a great opportunity to see who else is in the program. One of the things I always feel like doing good work is a collaborative effort. So being able to give feedback and receive feedback is really an important part in these classes. And I also think of both of these classes as kind of the first story of a house that you're building. So it is something that you come back to. And in graphic design 1, I covered the big basics that then get refined and that you study more in depth in progressive classes. And in foundation design, it's always a question, what is foundation design? It's not a drawing class. What we do there is we deal with the principles of design. And so one of the things about them is that they're fundamental and essential, but not simple. So seasoned designers and artists will continuously return to them to solve problems. And so I encourage everyone to enjoy problem solving, visual problem solving in their freshman year.
Great, thanks, Annette. And so I think that gives us a little bit of a sense of what it's like to come in that first year. And I would just add to that I teach, I don't get to see students typically until their sophomore year. And then I teach typography, and I teach junior design and senior design and internship. So the things that we work on sophomore year and beyond are, the foundation is already set in these courses like Intro to Graphic Design. And even that foundation course, sometimes you think that your freshman year courses aren't that directly related to what you do next. But as Annette said, like those are the things that you'll come back, those are the principles that you'll come back to as you're solving the other problems further along. Liz, you want to tell us a little bit about what you teach and sort of how they might fit into some of the things we've been talking about?
So if we're moving up beyond the basics, so the classes I quite often teach are junior level classes, advanced typography and motion graphics. So at this point, you'll already have your basic skills, your basic toolkit, and you'll start really moving into ways to visually express yourself through typography, which is super, super powerful, and integral part of design, and has a lot of potential because it's connected to language, but it's also graphic objects. So tremendous amount of work that we can do with sort of the advanced typography skills. And then moving into motion graphics, so really taking everything static that we've been working with and putting it into motion. So there's a huge, long history of both of these things in graphic design, but there's a big history of motion graphics in the field of graphic design.
Yeah, and so that makes me wonder, when I think about motion graphics, I think about the work that your students do, and then they, as sort of a foundation of motion, and then they keep making that work that is not static in junior or senior design, and often on into internships in their jobs. But I think it's not a term that we know a ton about if we're not in the design program. So can you tell me like where I might see motion out there in the world?
So motion graphics right now, we probably see pretty much everywhere: television, YouTube, Instagram, and it's really sort of a combination of photography, graphic, it could be any kind of graphic images, illustration, and typography all put together and in motion. So it's something that you may already be familiar with. You may already be posting some form of motion graphics onto Instagram and YouTube and Facebook.
Yeah, like I think something that's come up just this year that our audience might be really familiar with is TikTok. And so if you're on TikTok, TikTok is, the kind of short videos that you see, especially if you've had graphics added to them or type added to them, that's something that would happen in maybe a little bit more of a sophisticated way in a motion design class, and then be used in all of these areas of TV production, film, and then also on social media again. Does that sound right, Liz?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Brian, can you tell us if any new opportunities or area of interest that people who are just starting to study graphic design should be thinking of or know about, or maybe haven't heard of in high school, but are things that we think a lot about in the field?
Yeah, totally. I think that there are a lot of kind of branching out opportunities from graphic design, like thanks to ever evolving technologies, digital technologies, specifically interaction, which is my area of focus. So, for example, a lot of people will start off with, say, a formal training in graphic design, or they'll even start their careers off as graphic designers specifically, and then they'll start getting more and more into technology, more and more into interaction, and they'll start delving into what's called UX design, which is a big buzzword. So people may have heard a little bit about that already, but user experience design. So people can start branching into that, and that involves basically designing the fundamental ways of how people would use an app or a website, and really delving into how does a human being interact with technology and get a satisfying experience out of that. Another related area of design that many graphic designers will go into is user interface design, or UI design. So that's a similar area where it's involving digital technology and interaction, but it's more specifically about what are those interfaces, the systems of, it might sound really straightforward here, like buttons and menus and all of those pieces. It can sound kind of dry, but for many of us, myself included, it's very interesting to think through those and say, how do you make something that's really slick to interact with, that's actually fun to tap through the buttons, all the options, toggle things on and off, and to understand where you're at in the app or in the game or in the website. So that's another related area that a lot of people get into, as well as some areas for the very technically minded. For any math or science fans out there, data visualization is totally a growing field that some graphic designers get interested in, taking big data sets and making those interesting and understandable to an audience by using graphics, by using graphic design, basically. So there are a number of really interesting areas that keep opening up, that are so new that, there isn't necessarily, most schools wouldn't have sort of a degree in, specifically in UX design. There are increasingly programs where you can learn these things, but still, for the most part, most people aren't necessarily getting a degree. Those kinds of degrees aren't really offered yet. So, in most places. So a lot of those people, unscientifically, I'll say most probably are starting off in areas like graphic design, and then learning all about doing design in that way, and then sort of transitioning or applying those same graphic design skills to a really wide area of sort of design subspecialties, if you will.
Great. So, I mean, one of the things that we hear from Brian is this idea of technology and the idea that brands are looking to visualize information or engage with users in all sorts of different ways, and that continues to change. When I think about graphic design, I think about it as a field that is very closely aligned with technology, but one of the things I know that students sometimes ask is, hey, if I'm coming from a high school program where I didn't spend a ton of time doing graphic design software, we use the Adobe suite. So if I didn't do that, do I still have a future in graphic design? Will I come in at a huge deficit and like be the only one who doesn't know how to use Photoshop or Illustrator? And I'm wondering if I can kind of lean on Liz and Annette. You teach those graphic design 1 classes for years, and can you tell us a little bit about what happens if you haven't had that in high school?
Right, I'll start. I think that we have definitely found over the years that graphic design is a really educable skill, and I learned it, and we've taught it to many, many students, and watched many, many students who come in with all different levels of experience learn graphic design. And I think people have different learning pathways. Some people really take to the technical. Some people have a really different vision and voice and find other ways to express it. But I think there are just so many options in the paths of graphic design, and we've been super successful in taking students from all kinds of backgrounds and teaching them graphic design.
Great. Annette, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Not knowing the Adobe suite is not a problem, because that is a tool that can be taught. And actually, I find the back and forth between different media. I always find there's some students who prefer working by hand, and that kind of back and forth between working physically and digitally makes you come up with really good solutions. And I also feel like we exist in a physical world. So graphic design always goes back out there in a physical form often. And so the more skills you have and the more different ways you can approach solving a problem, the better. So the Adobe suite is just one tool of many tools.
Absolutely. I always find when I have students at career at open college days and stuff like that, asking this question, I would say that the visual, believe it or not, in the long run, the visual skills and the conceptual skills are actually the harder ones. Almost anyone can learn the Adobe suite, and there's lots of tools of how to make that easier these days. So that's certainly not something that incoming students should be worried about at all. We've been working, Liz and I have been working in this program for almost 15 years now. And I'm just wondering, Liz, if you can tell us a little bit about the success of our students and where they end up.
Wow. Okay, so I would say we are super, super fortunate to be teaching design in New York City. So New York City has this really thriving and diverse design community, and this enables students to take advantage of all kinds of things. So within the city, there's lectures, events, they meet working designers, large variety of internship opportunities. And this just enables the students to experience and explore all these different aspects of the discipline. So after graduation, our students have had great success in the industry. We now have students working at Apple, Facebook, Google, small design firms in the city, bigger design firms, motion graphics firms, really all
Showtime,
over.
NBC.
Showtime, NBC,
yeah.
right? And we have also a great alumni network of students who are working in these places who have helped other students become introduced to opportunities there. So I think we're really fortunate to be teaching design in New York City, and you will be fortunate to be studying design in New York City.
That's a great point. In the last week, I've had emails from 2 different alum, one asking for freelance, actually 3, an internship opportunity, a freelance opportunity, and a full-time entry-level job opportunity, which we were then able to pass on to either graduating students or students who are recently graduated and who might be looking for those opportunities. So that's a huge benefit, that it's not just the faculty, but you sort of become part of a family of students who maybe graduated from the program 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Brian, you're a relative newcomer to New York compared to some of us, and can you just say something about what it means to have moved to New York and to be in New York in its connection to design?
Sure, yeah. So I think that in addition to all of the really great points that Liz made, with sort of those, I guess I might call them the practical benefits of it, right? I think there's also just a great culture of design that exists in New York that is pretty rare. It really is sort of baked into so many things here. Graphic design itself, just sort of walking out and about, you're going to see really interesting examples of graphic design of all different kinds. Being able to just sort of pop into a bookstore really quickly. And I know that sounds really old fashioned, I guess, but really all of my graphic design friends, are everybody who I know who's a graphic designer enjoys being able to go into a bookstore, like an antique bookstore even maybe, and find just like a plethora of old art and design books, being able to just browse through those and look at really amazing examples of, for example, book design or poster design and things. But other kinds of design as well, right? Like New York just being sort of a center of so many things, whether it's fashion, architecture, all kinds of design culture that's just sort of just so many interesting examples of it, just sort of every day all around you, or being studied and pursued by, or being done by professionals in the world all about you. It's pretty unique of a sort of a place to be, with that many opportunities to just experience it, in addition to all of the really practical benefits that Liz had just mentioned too.
Great. And then do you have anything to add to that, sort of working in that intersection between art and design? Like, what does it mean to be here to you?
Well, I feel like, first of all, as Brian pointed out, there's so many excellent resources right at your fingertips, and there is more than you could ever do. So there are so many wonderful choices, from going to the MoMA or smaller museums like the Drawing Center. But I also find, for example, one of the things I always like asking my students is working with inspirations. And so the city is a huge source of inspirations. When I go and see galleries, say in Tribeca or the Lower East Side, I find what's inside of the gallery just as interesting as what's happening outside on the street. So for me, the street is a great source of inspiration, and just being able to see the life, the human interaction, the graphic interaction. New York is one big experiment in graphic design. So I cannot recommend New York more highly. So.
Awesome. So I know that we've been on a little while, so I do want to wrap it up. And as we wrap it up, I'm going to ask each of our faculty if they have last words for students considering studying at St. John's, and maybe to tell us, like, either a hobby or something they do related to design when they're not teaching. But before that, I do want to just give you a little bit of a perspective on what happens from that sort of beginning to the end. And so that last year that you're taking design classes, you've learned all this sort of skill sets from Liz in motion graphics, from those intro classes with Annette, some of that interaction work with Brian, and then you're putting that together and you're really learning about how to create sort of self-initiated projects where you're directing the work and you aren't working from a brief. It's a pretty big sort of shift for students, but it's really exciting because we get to see all of the skills that students learned over the first couple of years come together, and then we get to see what they make. And then finally, at the very end of your program in design at St. John's University, most students do an internship. There's also a thesis option, but 95% of our graphic design students do an internship for credit, where they're out working in a company. And basically everybody who wants to do an internship does that internship, but we also have students who have often done 1 or 2 internships in the summers before that. And so there's this real connection to the world, the industry of graphic design in New York, because we build that into the program all the way through at St. John's. So I'm gonna let each of our faculty members just say any last words for students considering St. John's, and just briefly tell us what you're doing when you're not teaching classes. Liz, do you want to go first?
So when I am not teaching, I design and animate motion graphics, which are basically, as I've said, graphic design in motion. So it's a combination of typography, graphic images, photography, all moving in unison. It's pretty much ubiquitous now. We see them everywhere. And I've worked on all different kinds of projects, from things for cable networks like HBO and Showtime, to film and film titles, documentaries, some data visualizations, some social justice projects. So there are lots and lots of different kinds of content. So it's super interesting and always something to be inspired by and learn about. And I would say about St. John's, it's a really rich, diverse environment, and it gives you the opportunity to be at a really large university, but also in a small department, to be in the city, but also outside of the city. So you have, the St. John's campus and that real like college campus environment. So it just provides a lot of different options, and we'd be happy to have you.
Great, thanks. Annette?
Yes, so when I'm not teaching, I'm usually working in my studio, and one of the things I've been focusing on are textiles and weaving. So the combination between text and textiles. So those two things flow together, and as I mentioned, I'm very interested in the intersection of disciplines, of art and design, and I think that is what makes a college experience at St. John's very rich, is that you can take from one course and take it to another course. In the graphic design program, it's very comprehensive and the classes are interconnected, and making those connections across boundaries, I think, is a really great thing as a designer and as a student.
Great, thanks, Annette. Brian? Last thought?
Yeah, I think so. My side of pursuits would be. I was actually, to be honest, I'm going to give you 2. So I was thinking more at first along the lines of when you first mentioned those. I was thinking more like, well, I've really been enjoying baking bagels, and I'm trying to perfect my bagel recipe and technique lately. So but maybe that doesn't sound as serious as what everybody else said. So on the more serious or designerly side, I think I'm always kind of tinkering around with code on various projects of one kind or another. So it could be a kind of data visualization type thing. I like making little interactives like that, as well as a very small Instagram that I do some animations, short animations that are all generated through code, entirely through code. So that's kind of another creative side hobby. And I would say, yeah, for people who are considering St. John's, I would say sort of like what Liz said, I think it's a great balance between the big size of a full university and New York City, but also a small enough department to where, you know, there is a sense of community and you're going to know the people that you are in the program with. It's not just a massive sea of strangers that you only ever see once and then never again. And yet it's big enough. The overall you know, department is big enough that you will still meet people outside of your major who you'll have new ideas that you can share with and things. So I really think it's a nice balance in that sense, and a great chance to kind of plug into a community and find a little space there. So yeah, I would say if you're at all interested or you're thinking about it, just you know, learn more, reach out, check out the sessions, the information sessions.
Great. So there's two things I'm really glad Brian brought up. The first is bagels, because he's been making me totally jealous with his pictures of bagels, which look pretty much like what I would see when I go to the bagel store. So I think that that's great to think about what we do when we're not wearing our kind of professional hat. And then the other thing that I think Brian brought up that's really important is that St. John's is a big university, but we're a very small department. So you're never going to be in a situation where somebody doesn't know your name. You'll have almost all of the faculty more than once, so you get to know them. We're tracking you through the program and really getting to know you and your work and your potential, and starting to think about where you might want to go professionally and having those discussions. So I think you get the best of both worlds in the sort of big university with all those resources of a big university, but the small department. So, you know, we have that sort of more collegiate family feel to the graphic design program for sure. So I'm going to answer my own question at the end here and just say that when I'm not teaching, a lot of what I do is writing on design, but that isn't, you know, that's sort of my one hat I wear. And then the other things that I do are I grow a lot of tomatoes in the summer. And I've found that I've been spending just so much time on the computer recently that I've also been doing drawings, which you see behind you. It's just like a way to re-engage with with physical art making. And so I think you can see that we all have kind of a diverse way that we're engaging with art and design. And I really hope that you'll consider joining us, and we'd love to see you in classes in the fall. And what we're looking for is students who feel like this is the right fit for them. So if you have questions about that, if you feel like it's the right fit, but you're not quite sure, please reach out, get in touch. We're happy to have a conversation. We're happy to put you in touch with a current student who might be able to answer those questions as well. Thanks, everybody.